G'day, friends and fans, and welcome. I'm your host, the author, David Applegate, author of the book, The Boyhood of Cade, book 1 of The Empire of Elves, and welcome to my channel. Before I begin, I'd like to remind you that this channel is sponsored by people like you, the viewing audience. After the show, check out the links in the description. I'll have George's links as well, so don't worry. Now, more details at the end. Now, if you're on Twitter watching this, unfortunately, you just have to look at our tweets. We can't actually add anything after it's published. Sorry. Elon's promised to fix it, but you know. Now, today with me, as you can tell, is George Cavanaugh. He's a professional audiobook narrator, author, and screenwriter. If you can't tell by his voice, I'd love to have it. Tell us, George. Please introduce yourself.
It's the radio voice. I think that's what
That's the one.
Everyone's.
I got the face for radio.
That's it. But no, I really appreciate you having me on, David. To your great show here, and my name's George Cavanaugh. Like Dave said, I'm a professional audiobook narrator. Written a screenplay, also a tough business, and have some short stories up on Barnes and Nobles, as well as a big work in progress off of the aforementioned screenplay. But we're the audiobook project that we're mainly discussing today. It was a heck of a project, really important project, and I hope your viewers might want to check it out after we're finished talking about it. So
definitely, I got the link to that already in the show, and I'll be adding your Barnes and Noble's links after we're done. Now, when did you realize you wanted to be a writer? Obviously, you know, when you start off, you got to start somewhere. You hear me? Are we frozen? I think we're going to crash. Oh, God, I haven't had this before. Just wait a moment, please. Sorry, everybody. I think George will be back. I'm just messaging George now, see what happened. Okay, hopefully George will be able to come back. In the meantime, I'll just bring up. He'll be back soon, I guess, I hope. And I'll just bring up. Oh, pardon me. Now, this is one of George's projects and his short stories on Barnes and Noble. Pages that make the book. You Can't Outrun Your Childhood on Barnes and Noble. And why does it so always happen to me? Here we go. Pages Part 2, Broken Hearts. So those will be added after the show. Hopefully George will be back soon. Well, it's going to probably reboot. I don't know what's happened. Try to wait as long as I can, and hopefully you'll stick with us. And he's back. Yes, it's really happened.
Internet's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, while you were gone, I shared the screen to your Barnes and Noble, and so
Oh,
I
what?
didn't
I
just sit here
certainly appreciate
complaining.
it. Yeah, that's the wonder of modern technology. We're doing well. We're doing well for all the way around the globe, though. I think we're doing well. So
We are, and I mean, I remember I grew up with technical difficulties being every second day. You know, when you're watching the news, brrr, oh, we can't bring you.
right.
We've lost. So kids these days don't know what it's like to pretty much every second news broadcast
Well,
static.
I had to hurry up and dial up again, so that was.
Okay, well, you just finished introducing yourself, professional audiobook narrator, author, and screenwriter. And I will reiterate now, when did you realize you wanted to be a writer?
Well, I tell you, I've been writing on and off for years, um, in my downtime, but it's one of those things that, as a writer, and it may not be applicable to all the authors out there, but there's a mood to writing, and it's something that just some works in progress can go on forever, and they have in my case, but I really began writing in earnest, and just put out 2 short stories from my series that I plan on having in a collection. Put those out, and I'm currently engaged in a big work in progress on the screenplay I've written with my screenwriting partner, and so writing's an interesting journey. I think all authors can attest to it out there. So
I think for everybody, it's like you have two people, the same idea, same circumstances, and they'll still write a different story. That's what's amazing, you know.
oh,
That
absolutely. And I find, even with myself, with my characters, the mood that you're in at the time, and you're developing characters, it affects you. End up someplace you might not have wanted to be when the time comes.
now, how did you get into that predicament?
it's it's rough. Maybe it's based on my eclectic personality. Probably. It's
I think so, but tell us more about your projects. I mean, you've got a lot of stuff in the air right
yeah,
now.
yeah. I'd love to. Really, I just finished a huge audiobook, the audiobook project that you put up a link to. It was a huge project. It's And I'd really like you viewers to, if they're interested in geopolitics and the world situation that's going on now, it's really quite an interesting book. It's by the Russian author Vyacheslav Nikonov. He's in Russian government. Um, he's a very highly thought of political science academic, taught at Harvard and other places in the U.S., and runs the Ruski Mir, which is the Russian cultural organization to spread Russian culture and language across the globe.
Quite
But
literally reads Russian World. I'm quite familiar with it. And
right, right, and
it's a
this
brilliant think tank if you want to know what everybody else thinks about us.
right, and that's why I found and signed on to this particular project. I found it important for that reason. It was a book written for a Russian audience that was translated to English by the great Hugh Davies out of Oxford. And it's a rare glimpse for Western audiences to get inside of Russian political thought. Just as you said, what the rest of the world may think of us, and the West, and what they envision globalization versus nationalism as it's occurring, as we're all witnessing Brexit, and various other forms of things going on in Europe and with the U.S. So it's just a highly detailed book that's really worth listening to.
See, in the Russian world, they know more about what's going behind the scenes in our countries than we do, because that's mostly their news. They report their news in depth, 24 hours a day, because entertainment in Russia is has been for a long time politics. You didn't, you know, so that
Absolutely.
left over from the Cold War, where you had three channels of politics, is still there. Those three channels still exist. TASS, although Pravda is no longer Russian, but it's still there, and Sputnik, which has been there, I think, since the beginning. Right, it's one of the earliest Russian foreign news services.
Oh, and it is, and they actually have and Mr. Nikonov mentions it in the book. At this time, the Russian press they have access. It's a little different. Someone my age who remembers the Cold War era and the Soviet Union
Yeah,
era, it's really quite interesting to see what's going on in Russia now and their democracy, as it were, and they have over 2,000 news channels and access to Western news channels, obviously, and
yeah,
he mentions
they
it in the
have.
book.
Yeah, sorry,
Sure.
I was just going to say they have. If you let's say you're a mid-level blogger, right? You have a few thousand followers, and you're in a major city. You could go. You're more likely to get into the Kremlin than, say, an American blogger in getting access to the president. Could you? People don't understand that difference. When Russia hold that Russian news conference, that's a hall for thousands of reporters. In America, what is it, 36 in a little box?
Right, with pre-picked questions and and a teleprompter. Sure. It's very interesting, and the author himself is very interesting of the audiobook. Um Mr. Nikonov, of course, his grandfather was Molotov, Vyacheslav Molotov, Stalin's
And
foreign minister,
also
of the
well known.
Molotov cocktail fame. But
Yes.
and it's but he's like I said, a very respected academic in the field of political science, and it really is worth learning what the rest of the world thinks of us, especially as we look at everything unfolding in the world today, wars
Yeah.
across the globe, but BRICS, versus the petrodollar, and what they're envisioning for their place in the future of the world
Yeah.
and geopolitics. So,
The thing is, if you're on the other side and you're asking, why is my country broke when we're pumping $60 billion in oil? You have a right to ask that question. But we're asking the same question on our side. And that's where services like RT made so much inroads to become, from a blog, literally a blog, to one of the top 10 news sites in the world. I think they've fallen just to 11 because of the, what would you call it? Censorship.
right, right.
And ironically, if Russia did that to, say, the Washington Post, which is a blog, formerly a newspaper, the American government would be up there rattling the cage, so to speak.
Yeah, and it's very interesting what's occurring with the various social media platforms. X is a
Yes.
great example. It's taken its toll on legacy media, obviously, and
Yeah.
legacy media has taken a toll on itself over the last few years, and their trust numbers haven't. I think the latest survey I saw, legacy media's trust numbers haven't been this low since pre-Watergate, which the American political scandal in the 70s. So it's very interesting
And
to watch unfold.
I know it's controversial, but a lot of people now know more about Watergate than we did then. They know now. People know, but people still find it hard to believe Bernstein was a FBI informant and getting his information direct from the CIA who was involved in Nixon was framed, where you had if say I went to trial today, right, and I put Nixon on trial, and Nixon had a better lawyer who wasn't a DNC operative but an actual lawyer who stood up and said to the court, I'm filing a motion for dismissal, and the judge would ask why, obviously, and he would say, tampering with evidence. The FBI deleted 10 minutes of tape. We delivered 98 minutes of audio. They played 88. Now, after you list all the people who were thrown off, you had Hillary Clinton and all these other political operatives, right, who for months been screaming Nixon is a crook, and just put them on the stand and say, where's your proof? Where's your proof? Where's your proof? You couldn't have a fair trial. And with obstruction of justice by the FBI taking 20 years to reveal the fact that they deleted it was them who deleted the tapes.
Well, yeah, some might find it very surprising that intelligence agencies and other arms of the government influence media. That's an eye roller.
Operation Mockingbird.
Sure. And ironically enough, Nixon was one of those presidents that
he was polarizing because he called people out who didn't want their dark, dirty secrets revealed, or the fact that they had made promises. I think one of the biggest things why they got rid of Nixon is because he got them all together, right? This big, and he said, how are we going to handle the Vietnam War? And everybody just turned to Westmoreland, and he said, it's been a big clusterfuck, but give me a year, I can fix this. And what did he do? Well, I've been to Vietnam, and most people don't know this. He was holding meetings with the other side.
Well, and I tell you, and the establishment never did like Nixon. Now, I will say, one of my favorite geopolitical professors in college was, Kissinger's the devil. So I'll just go on record.
But it's the devil yeah, absolutely. I think that's the problem. Yet they love Kissinger. They love Kissinger because he gave them because he took us off the gold standard, and they can blame Nixon for that, even though it was.
And Kissinger's still around. He refuses to go away from the National Security Council, I guess.
Yeah. But I remember, and I forget his name, but I remember Nixon's funeral, right, where the guy, he comes up and says, I apologize, Richard, for lying about you for all these years. And he just walks away. And it was the former head of the FBI under Richard Nixon. He'd been lying about it.
Well, yeah, and that's a timely apology. I take it.
Well, they called him Tricky Dicky because nothing stuck to him. But the thing is, right, Nixon had a secretary who was on the phone every second hour to the Democrats, telling them everything. Nixon was under psychological stress, and he was seeing a therapist. But these days, that's commonplace. Back then, it was really bad. But so was Kennedy. And Kennedy, that's how Kennedy knew, because his office was down the hall from Nixon's therapist. He saw Nixon coming and going from his office every day. That's why that's in Watergate. They had that level in Watergate where all it's supposed to be a hotel, but they had all these secret offices, right?
Right. And I tell you, and I can't even get my therapist to return my calls for appointments anymore. So I don't know what that means.
Yeah. So you have, and see, I've been to Vietnam, and there used to be a museum, okay, called the Museum of the American and Chinese Wars. Sorry, it was originally called the Museum of the French Atrocities, but they renamed it. But they still had the French atrocities up on the walls. And one of them was a quote from then junior Congressman Bobby Kennedy, saying that if America knew what our allies were doing in Vietnam, they would crucify all of us.
Oh, and that's absolutely. And I think you're finding a lot of the similarities historical similarities repeating
Yes.
themselves today. And again, that's why I found it so important to get involved in that project. And dialogue is the key to everything. And your viewers would be surprised the Russian take. One of the most important questions Mr. Nikonov asked in the novel and in the prologue was how the Russians feel about it. Is are we a part of the West or are we not? They're only when they're needed. World War II, other items and of geopolitical importance. And
I can understand
it's a fascinating question. Sure,
it is. I can understand from a mindset where you go from being an ally to an enemy within 3 years, then an important ally in the war in China, of which turned against, because Russia had a problem. They had a huge Chinese population and a huge Mongolian population that was constantly surging north. And it was pretty much threatening the Russian position, and rightfully so, they wanted to push back. But then you had war profiteers come in, and instead of dealing with the problem in the north, they want to see Shanghai and Beijing, and after it becomes this huge cluster of quagmire, the Americans decide to bully the Japanese into it and then get out.
Right. And I tell you, that's one of the most fascinating aspects of the book is that he breaks down the various civilizations, like just as you're just speaking of. He breaks them down historically, present day, what they're accomplishing across the globe, and then what the future may look like for
with Russia,
globalization.
It's always cause and effect. And they're looking at historical references saying, every time there is a war, there is a cause. And every time there's a war, there's an effect. And if we can affect the outcome before it happens, we don't have a war. And that is what what was it? 12 years asking America, get your missiles out of here. Get your missiles out of here. You're not looking at what's going on. You're not looking at the bigger picture. You're enabling a criminal enterprise. These are all the things. These are once headlines carried by The Guardian, and now look at it. It's quite the opposite. So from the Russian mindset, how can you trust anybody when they can flip on you that often?
It is, and it's very conflicting emotionally. In a historical context, you're absolutely right. Of course, the tragedy of the Ukrainian conflict going on now, but the last and American foreign policy hawks have known this for decades, that's a red line for Russia, obviously. And in a historical context, it's because the last time they allowed someone to saddle up to the steps in Ukraine, they lost 75 million people. I think it's obvious that, they may demonstrate some concern about that, so in a historical context. So nothing's in a vacuum.
And when they take down a war memorial to the defeat of the bad guy and put up a memorial to the bad guy, and the West goes, it's just their culture. See, but we're powerless. And I think the average Russian knows that too, because they feel the same thing whenever their government makes a mistake. But our governments aren't making a mistake. They're taking deliberate action.
It's Canada, interesting to watch.
Cheering on somebody they knew was Operation Paperclip.
It's interesting to watch unfold, especially the political dynamics that are going on geopolitically, especially in the EU,
which is a dying empire. If anybody hasn't figured that out yet,
and he speaks a lot about that, yes, and mainly because of the globalization. In fact, I believe the clip I had posted for our show, to
Yeah.
announce our show, had a brief little statement about Europe. And it's because there's a strong contingent of Europeans that are nationalists and want to maintain sovereignty. And, the
other half
globalists.
don't.
Yeah, the globalists and the ones that want to kowtow to Brussels and the EU. It's interesting to watch unfold. And not only that, in the Indo-Pacific region, obviously, is we're talking about it's something.
We've never had like the US financial empire is dying, the European empire is dying, but to some extent so is the Maoist empire, right? I think Xi is rewriting China as we speak. It's very hard to decide which way Xi will go, because there's always old guard pressures to keep the status quo, but the status quo isn't working because the Chinese economy has plateaued, yet by all measures it should be still rising, but it's plateaued because investments have gone into hollow projects that don't yield long-term income.
Well, yeah, that mathematically they have a population problem, obviously, which you saw the reverse of their one-child policy.
Mathematically you can't keep growing. But see, Xi's not worried about the plateauing population. He's worried about the fact that it keeps going up and down. It never gets past the middle.
Yeah, and they're making a lot of moves across the globe in combination with, BRICS. It is a huge issue. And people need to pay attention to what's going on with BRICS, because it's interesting to watch unfold, especially in third world or the global south as it's known now. It's interesting to watch it unfold because a lot of people strongly feel that what the globalists are doing out of Brussels and Europe is basically green colonialism.
Yes.
So, and BRICS is filling that vacuum.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, and I say this to people, you have what's now called neo-colonialist powers. For a long time, America, and to some extent their UK partnerships, were the only ones playing this game. And now that it's been done to them, they're crying. And for the rest of the world, they're saying, now you know how we feel.
Yeah, and
we're just playing by your rules.
and I don't think, and what's fascinating is I don't think they know how to handle it. To deal with their successes globally, when now it's come to the point where, I mean, it's the printing press argument, right? That especially technology today, no power likes a new technology that can spread information greatly, far and wide, without having some type of control over it, because for obvious reasons. So
Gutenberg.
Right.
Gutenberg didn't even have the printing press running for an hour before they came in and smashed it.
Right. and then regulated it. Quite.
Yeah.
So,
and it's not just the West, by the way. You could get stories in the Ottoman Empire where the Talib, I think it was called then, now called the Taliban. Did you know how they started? They used to be like the Islamic equivalent of monks. They spent their days making sure the Quran was properly copied, edited, well maintained, and distributed to the various imams, clerics, and other holy persons. Right. The Ottomans didn't like that. So they attacked and burnt down their monastery, I believe, because it was actually like a monastery. You could call it as such. I don't know its Islamic name, but they fled to the edges of the empire, and they basically, that's what they conspired with the British, they conspired with the Kurds, they conspired all these years to get rid of the Ottoman Empire. But once they got rid of it, they didn't know what to do. So they went back to the edges of the empire. And as it crumbled, but they never returned to their old ways. And I think because they're, and that's what happens when you rewrite yourself historically. Now, on a smaller scale, if I'm as a writer, let's say you're writing science fiction and you're pretty successful and you have this fantastic book and it just became #1. Then 6 weeks later, Star Wars comes out and your sales worse. Every concept you came up with is in this movie. And you're watching somebody make millions where you were making once thousands. You can understand from a book perspective, you'd be pretty pissed, right?
Right.
But the thing is, you die a year later.
Oh, absolutely.
Nothing ever gets done. But imagine, on the other hand, you are a successful writer and you see not only 1, not 2, but 8 books make $100 million off your writing and concepts. You start to get pretty pissed, right?
I would think so.
Now imagine that 400 times over, where the average Hollywood movie or whatever is making more money and the original artists are poor, broke, etc. So, because a lot of our audience are going to be poor, broke writers, right? So imagine now you're that poor, broke writer. You now know how it feels to be Kenya, and other resource-rich countries. And you look to Saudi Arabia and go, why are they rich but not us? Why do they get favoritism, not us? So, from a writer's perspective, there are ways to break down geopolitics so that you can understand that it's not really left and right, but those are talking points.
Oh, absolutely.
In Russia,
absolutely.
There is no left and right. It is either if you're Russian, you have to be on the side of Russia. That is how they are thinking right now. There is no left and right. If you ask the Communist Party what they think, they say they do not like what the West has done to us. The West keeps crying about oppressors, and yet you have all the opportunity to do something about it.
Yeah, and I think and I have high hopes for the West to overcome what they've created for themselves, hopefully.
Yeah.
Is because there is a huge pushback from half the population, say, of the United States. There is a huge pushback.
And I'm not talking about Republican, Democrat here.
Right.
There are a lot of Democrats who don't like what's going on either.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And anytime you get left and right, and I think I had even posted about it, there is no linear left and right in politics. It's a circle. And anytime you go too far left or right, you end up at totalitarianism. And, so there's a balance. And
there's you're supposed to balance between anarchy and totalitarianism in the middle, not just on the edge.
Yeah. And what you see is that pendulum swing in that circle, fighting each other back and forth. And
have you ever seen the symbol of unity? You have the circle with the dot in the middle,
right?
And the Japanese philosophy of Zen says that dot is supposed to be you, and if you can understand that, you actually are on your way to actually doing good.
Right, and I think at the end of the day, it's like I said, I have high hopes for the West, but I just personally find it very important for dialogue, and to know what your perceived enemies are thinking.
Yes. Because they didn't want to be our perceived enemies, and they weren't our perceived enemies until somebody says, you know what, I need a distraction to win an election.
Yeah, and I think for a great, and I hate to use I heard you cuss a little earlier, but
Yeah,
but no, the term I use, I think people, because of technology and the expansion of information availability, that
yeah.
there's a large contingent of the global population that's realized that war and it
It's a
it's
racket.
accompanying, yeah, it's
It's
resource
a
fuckery.
company.
And
Yeah.
that's the term I use, is resource
Mm.
fuckery. They figured it out, that's what it is.
Well,
And they're
the thing
tired of it,
is,
for
the thing is,
humanity's sake.
like, Russia doesn't realize too that they're on the same list, like China, Africa. They're also looking at Russia and saying, don't think for a second because we're giving you this opportunity that we're going to let you fuck us like you did with, like the West did. Now, the people don't understand why the West had invaded Africa. I think a lot of our history is poorly taught because we don't get the context. And if you actually understand the context, and it all goes back to a handful of people in basically in the periods between 400 BC and 400 AD, where you had just so much open space where somebody could just go out, recruit an army, and have people slowly come to them and build up, like Genghis Khan, etc. Caesar could, all these people, they could just build up armies, basically. And one of the reasons why I think governments today don't give us a lot of free time is because they're afraid we'll go off into the desert and start building up armies.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we're all tired of fighting your resource fuckery. I'd like to read
Yeah, but
and
we
maybe talk
inherited
to
it.
my
Yeah,
friends.
we inherit this mess. Like when I prepare for a project, I do my research, and everything seems to come back to this one period in time. Like the Celts, they were pushed back by the Romans, so they invaded Ireland. Uh, the Mongols, they were pushed back, and eventually they said, "Wait a minute, we outnumber you," and they invaded China. But you cannot imagine a time where there were 200 million Mongols and only 50 million Chinese. You
Right,
cannot imagine
right.
that. How? Because you cannot understand that China today is not China then. And all these things have had an accumulative effect on people. And I
Well,
think,
sure, and even on their current political thinking, and that's what
and
people,
that's
I think, are
why,
beginning to realize. Hopefully.
yeah, and this is why stories matter, because stories can give us possibility, hope, wonder, a distraction, but but unfortunately, far too often, they're commercialized, distilled, politicized, and then mass marketed with budgets that do not make extraordinary sense. Like, what I actually, the other day I was walking past a bus and it had an ad for a movie that for Mission Impossible. That movie came out over 6 months ago, but that just shows you how quickly and how rapidly the economy is in decline.
Hmm.
Because keep telling us they're spending all this money, but we're not seeing it.
Right. And I I think our industry, as you say, writing and books and stories, they can move people. And I think as an author, I think that's what I'd hope to accomplish it, with my work eventually, is just to be able to move people in that respect, because I believe humanity's kind of coming to, it just
And
feels
it's step.
different than it feels. I'm a little long in the tooth, as we like to say in America, old, and
Yeah.
it's but it feels different because of
Yeah.
technology. And I mean, here we are, you in Australia and me here in beautiful New Orleans on the Gulf Coast in the United States, but we're having a discussion about some important things that make sense for people sometimes. So,
and believe me, from this history, and when you understand that without books, like, people, I believe, create their own enemies. They create their own drama around them.
And I think that's in everyday life too.
Zen philosophy has the symbol for it, the circle, and it's empty. Where are you in this circle? The symbol of unity. Where are you in this circle? And when you understand how all these different philosophies, they all share common themes, from folklore, legends, like, in almost every culture has a dragon. Almost every culture has giants, dwarves, and elves. Every culture has demons, and some have demons, devils, angels, etc. But it goes on. There's ghosts, wraiths. Once you start to realize how much commonality humanity has, you pretty much say, you know what? Diversity is having Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Israel, Palestine, Turkey, Romania, Bulgaria, the Netherlands, England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, etc. Not the EU, not the United Kingdom, not the North American Trade Union, etc. Those are not diversities. Those are empires.
Yeah, and I think in the end, people, look, we all bleed red, and we all long to feed our families. Yeah. And I think, like I said, it kind of feels different from when I was younger. So
yeah, and I think a lot of people are not going to like this, but when I talk about a two-state solution being applicable to many situations right now, I mean it. Literally, most people don't want to be part of the EU anymore. They don't, because it's not the European Economic Union. It's Klaus Schwab's in your pocket.
That's it. And I tell you, it's amazing how even across the globe, you in Australia, and like I said, a large contingent of the American population expresses exactly what you just said, because it's amazing, and I think it's due to technology.
Yeah, it's due to technology. I don't want to say that any one person made a greater impact or less of an impact, but one of the great impacts of Nikola Tesla wasn't so much his inventions, but his predictions where they would go. One of his predictions was social media. He said it would occur within 100 years, and it will transform society irreversibly, because you cannot undo social media.
Yeah, and it is. And like I said, I'm actually happy to be old enough to remember when we didn't have it, and quasi young enough, since my birthday was yesterday, but quasi young enough to be a part of watching it unfold, because it is fascinating, Although AI, I'm really concerned about.
Now, I'm concerned
especially
about AI
in our
too.
industry.
Like, from a tool perspective, I would like AI as a tool to fix my spelling and grammar. Not rewrite what I wrote, but fix the positions of comma, tell me my pacing issues, tell me where I've used the wrong word or could use a better word that fits the context, stuff like that, as a tool. Just like a thesaurus is a tool. Just like a dictionary is a tool. Dictionaries don't rewrite. Thesauruses don't rewrite. Now, from a screenwriter's perspective, you would want AI to tell you, right, boom, the positioning of the words, to make the do my formatting for me, and
right.
make sure I'm in that 90-minute window. and I have room to expand or add credits and stuff like that as the direct, and make scene alterations as the director, not as the AI demands.
Sure, and it is a fascinating tool. It's just, but as you know,
Unfortunately,
yeah, we're seeing it being used.
challenge, human
Yeah,
challenge. How far can we take it? Whether you're a mountain climber, writer, I mean, I know from an author's perspective, Stephen King has crossed so many lines and gotten away with it. But even today, he has admitted he cannot believe some of the stuff he got away with writing.
right, and yeah, and I think to kind of allude to the point you just made, when you say how far we can take it,
Yeah.
I think with AI, I worry about in some respects how far it will take itself when the
Well,
time comes,
that's it. That's
and
it.
because you're even seeing now, and I have to tell you, as a professional audiobook narrator, it's
It'll, yeah.
ACX is launching their beta program now for
So is Google.
audiobooks. Yeah, and
Google.
it's you should all writers, you should stick to human narrators. We have more feeling, more.
But Google, in a lot of cases and in a lot of countries, they won't give us audiobook writers. They won't give us audiobook contracts. They won't. They are pushing countries like Australia to only use AI.
Hmm.
Google, to some extent, Amazon. Um, I mean, Barnes and Noble just flat out, refuses. There are to try and get, as an Australian, to try and get an audiobook made, I have to get a US contract. It could cost thousands of dollars to get everything set up. And you
Right.
know what'll happen most of the time? Half the time those books will be released for free. And they'll tell you, just be glad, just be happy people are enjoying your entertainment. You feel like, I forget his name in Tolstoy, sitting there on this, with one potato in his hand, you know what I'm talking about, Yeah, I feel so glad that everybody else, that I've done all this work as a farmer and I get one potato.
It is. It's going to be again interesting to watch that unfold as well, and I just hope that consumers consumers recognize that human beings should be involved in creation, and
Yeah,
hopefully it will remand itself to a tool. But what you see is the big conglomerates in our industry pushing towards
a
what
dying
can be
empire.
produced cheaply for them. I mean, just as an author, on the big platforms like Amazon and
Yeah.
Audible, and it's you're constantly fighting for fair royalty repayments, and
Well, I had a problem with my first book. They sold it for $43 and I got 6 cents.
right.
And I questioned them and I argued with them, and I'm saying, look, how can I compete when you're selling my book for 3 times as much as the other guy's book? And they just said,
Sure.
your book's worth more. And I'm going, that's freaking fantastic. But you're making more than me. That is not, you're not
Right.
even giving, you can sell another person's book for far less. It's costing you the same to print. I know how much it's costing you to print. I have people complaining my book is costing that too much to buy. They want it. They literally, just refused. It took over a year to finally resolve it. And what they did, they stopped printing it. When they finally decided to pay me fair royalties, they
That was
gave me
it.
$100
Yeah.
and then stopped printing my book.
Right, and your story's not unique, David. It's, and I guess the rebel in me, part of me wants to say that I hope some of this technology benefits our industry in that. And like I said, I think it is the rebel in me. The legacy publishers irritate me to no end as gatekeepers to.
But Amazon's become the gatekeeper
Oh, sure,
they swore
it's
they weren't going to be,
sure, sure. So like I said, even when I mentioned earlier, hey, I
Yeah.
have high hopes for maybe maybe X if it does what it says it's going to be.
Well, yeah.
People like us can
reach
take
the
that
audience
ball.
with that. Yes.
Sure, we're already self-marketing as indie authors, and we're doing all the work. So legacy publishers, keep your editors, your agents, your and we'll have a platform where we can reach consumers and let the free market decide our fate, where people can access our work,
or access the links to access our work through. I mean, a lot of people don't know this. A lot of anime, some of the, there used to be a company very, very big in the anime industry, and a lot of anime don't actually start as manga. They start as books. And over time, manga artists would convert the books to manga. Then various artists, hentai, anime, and others would all come in, and you would have from one book thousands of other artists all making a living. But then commercialization. Disney, they call it the Disneyfication of Japan in the 70s, where thousands of artists were replaced by sketch overlays. So it made manga faster, it made anime faster, and then came computerization. And then while it gave us more content, it gave us less variety, because they started metricing the audience, finding what worked, finding what didn't. Now you don't have a diversity of stories. You have a front page on Amazon where 80% of the business is transacted because too many people won't press next.
Right. And I tell you, I'm not that I'm a Luddite per se.
No.
And industries evolve, and look, we're in a day and age where the exponential evolution of technology is incredible, obviously.
Yes.
So I would never. It's fascinating to me to watch it unfold, like I said earlier. But what I don't want to see, and what's occurring in our industry is, to have us creators, creators be able to, buy the huge conglomerates of.
Unfortunately,
and the only ability for our work to get to masses is through them.
Unfortunately,
and I hope,
since
I hope
70
people,
years, I think.
Sure, and I hope people in our industry start to realize that maybe as technology evolves and becomes cheaper and cheaper for all of us to access, because I'm accessing some of it already, and obviously you are. You're, reaching viewership through your channels. It's to take advantage of that, and hopefully one day we can get to a point where we can kind of break those chains, I guess, as the old saying goes.
A lot of this technology was to break chains. Like, could you imagine being an author 20, even 30 years ago, where just to get published on Amazon, you had to go. So there were so many more hurdles because there was no Kindle Direct.
Right.
You still had to go through a publisher.
Mm-hmm.
And the publishers made it harder, not less.
Oh, absolutely. And they, and again, in the capitalist free market system that's
supposed
okay.
To be a free market.
Yeah. Exactly. It's supposed to be a free market, but when you have conglomerates that become gatekeepers for the work, depending on how much money they're able to make off of the artist or the author, it's a problem.
And the biggest problem is the push for 99-cent books, right? You cannot make a living off a 99-cent book. I don't care how many YouTube ads you keep showing me of these people getting $100,000 a week. Sorry, bro. You know how many 99-cent books you have to sell to get $100,000 a week?
Right.
Talk about false advertising.
Yeah, it still amazes me as a bit of a chastisement. for the viewership, but it does. It still amazes me that, people will spend $5 for a cup of coffee and gripe that something that an author's put a year and a half of his soul into. It's priced over $4.99. I can't do that.
Yet, and there are exceptions to that, yet you'll sometimes see the absolute worst, lowest trash going for $14, or somebody will go, "Oh, $50 a month for OnlyFans, no worry." Press the tip button, $50 tip button, or they'll get a mail from a politician saying democracy is under threat, and boom, there goes their paycheck.
well, hopefully, hey, we're doing our part. We're spreading literature, and
we're in the wrong racket. We're in the wrong racket.
I still don't think anybody would push my button for OnlyFans, so I don't know. I'll keep plugging along and writing.
No, but you know what I mean, where it's called the perception of value. Society's perception of value. I mean, I don't celebrate 75 years of Disney. I celebrate the 75 years of poor mugs, the 15,000 mugs a year who get squashed by the conglomerate who makes $100 million off their work and pays them $6 royalties.
Exactly. Well, hopefully we can fix this with your show and spreading the word on other shows.
Spreading the word, because teaching people about the industry, preparation, advertising, all that stuff. I do that, with writing tips and that, world building. I really in our lifetime, we're going to read a few thousand books. And I try to do that. And to do that, you've really got to turn off the editing box, because there's a reason why it's called programming.
Right.
If you want diversity, you have to have diversity of thought. You have to have diversity in your life. You have to realize that half the world, to them, diversity means we have our national identity, right? We don't want your McDonald's. We don't want your Starbucks. We don't want your Subway. We want to go to our restaurants but you see, I know how conglomerates work, and a cheap burger, like a cheap novel, is very alluring. Sometimes a cheap, poorly written novel can become a bestseller because it appeals to the lowest common denominator. It doesn't challenge the reader. It strokes their ego, tells them they can be special. And boom, Bob's your uncle. You have an MCU empire, which burns out because they run out of stories because it has no diversity. As a writer, I've seen this happen so many times. This is why the Japanese manga used to be so successful, and could have Bleach having 24 seasons and selling over 100. Bleach has sold more copies of its first volume than J.K. Rowling. Yet hardly anybody outside the Western bubble actually understands that there's the rest of the world out there too,
Yeah,
and that there are franchises in other countries that have done far better and far more successful with far more interesting and diverse tales. And that's one of the things I like to do, is to prompt people to be very diverse in their reading and their writing.
Yeah, and no, I agree wholeheartedly, and hopefully that does come to fruition, because people seem to forget.
Fire.
Yeah,
and I've come under fire from both sides. My characters are too diverse, and for the right and for the left, they're not diverse enough. There is no pleasing the audience right now for some,
Well, and I think you can come under fire, but in all reality, I think people, what you said was right. Is there is a whole world out there of differing opinions and experiences, and people need
cultures that don't want to be like us, but they can. It's not because they hate us. It's because they
They're
want to
different.
be who they are, not
Exactly.
and these people in California are saying they want to be their authentic self. Guess what? So do 99% of the planet.
Sure, absolutely. I tell you what. And you're right. That is what it is. It's just because they're different, it doesn't mean they're wrong. Yeah,
Yes.
there's their history. And again, to harken back to the work that you've linked, the audiobook project. That was one of the things I found fascinating, that it does a great job historically of illuminating why the various regions that are competing on the ever-changing geopolitical landscape that we have now, why they are the way they are, why politically, culturally, and it places them in their proper historical context. So
yeah. Now these are a lot of I think a lot of new writers would like to know, how do you prepare? Because you've undertaken some big projects here that have that you have a gift which you're taking full advantage of, which more power to you, because everybody should take advantage of their gifts rather than let them lie idle. So how do you prepare?
what I tell you, preparation's an interesting topic when it comes to writing, because I've found that a lot of spontaneity helps in some respects versus that solid have the board with the cue cards and the pinned and strings and trying to make sense of it. But a few times I've been asked what advice I might give writers, and the main, and it may sound simplistic, but the answer is to write, because there's a lot inside of everyone, and most writers that have something to share never get it to the paper because they over prepare or want to over prepare to the point where they never put that pen to paper and just spill what's in their heart or in their minds out. And
that's true.
and don't worry about what the result is, because trust me, in any work you're going to have editing out of the yin yang, whether you want it or not, after you're finished. So get it on the paper.
I know this is a controversial topic, but you've heard about the writer's journey and you've heard about all the complaints that people don't follow the winning formula. But on the other hand, was it the winning formula, or was it the lack of competition? Now, I think a lot of books today were only successful then because they lacked competition. Today, we're in the most competitive market in the world. Writing is far more competitive for attention than most people understand or realize. On X, everybody seems to be reaching that plateau where once you get to that 10,000 followers, you're actually reaching less people than you did before. You're actually decreasing. I mean,
and I'm wondering if part of that is a function of it's the eye of the tiger syndrome. As you're clawing your way to that follower mark, you're a little more hungry, that type of thing. And then when you reach that plateau, you start switching your marketing priorities, and all of a sudden
because you're seeing your engagement go down, so you're tweeting more, and you see your engagement go down, and eventually you're using tools. What's my best time? And unfortunately, I think it's because we're butting up against each other. It's like the Roman Empire. When the Roman Empire was small, it wasn't butting up against Sabine or Etrusca or any of the other nations that we never told about that existed. But once they started butting up against other empires, they started absorbing them, and that was a conditioning, because when Rome was small, they were attacked. And if you take it from the writer's perspective, the small writer is Rome being attacked. But once they get big, they want to go on the offensive.
Right.
But unfortunately, they're butting up to empires with the same manpower, the same, and in some cases, bigger marketing budgets, and a society that is conditioned to follow what the mainstream tells us.
Yeah, and I think if I had to try to if I had to try to peg one thing I'd say is really important for any writer to do, even on X or any other social media platform, and actually the algorithm seems to favor it somewhat, is just build it. It's like anything else in life, building relationships. And once you begin it, even if it's with your social followers and commenting or just engaging with them on things other than your writing, I find I have a lot more success spreading my other messages. But being part of people will never change, I don't think, regardless of how good the technology gets. If you can't engage people on a one-on-one, you probably won't have any success in any endeavor, much less writing. So
Yeah, I'd be a fantastic writer. They said, if only everybody, everybody said, only if, yeah. But everybody in life, whether you're a billionaire, millionaire, a struggling artist like myself who has no job to fall back on, there are just so many what ifs in our life. And I understand that. If I had $1 million budget, I probably would. If somebody said, here's $1 million in that free advertising. Yeah, I would. I'd probably go mad on various platforms. But here's the thing. If you don't know how to market, it doesn't matter if you've got a $10,000 budget or $1 million budget. Marketing these days is reaching the audience you don't have. That's why so many people, they hit that point and they're decreasing. Why? Because somebody else out there can do it bigger, better, faster. And that, unfortunately, is the reality, in that you only have a small window of opportunity. Every time a new book comes out, you only have a week, because within that week, thousands more's coming out. This is why I said we're in the most competitive field right now. There isn't 7,000 movies coming out a week.
right. And I tell you, it's marketing is it. The indie author today has to be everything, and marketing is
Yes.
so crucial, because you can have the greatest work of all time, but if you don't know how to market, I don't know how it is in Australia, but even comparing it to the medical field in the United States, doctors today in the United States, if they're not voracious,
advertising,
if they're not voracious businessmen and have a voracious appetite for marketing and things of that nature, and know how to run a business, they could have the greatest bedside manner ever, and medical technique, they'll fold. They can't afford to operate. So same with us.
Unfortunately for a lot of us, we just cannot afford the marketing right now.
Absolutely.
The marketing agents, you're paying, even like $5 on X to reach what, a few, maybe 100 people.
I do find X the cheaper of the platform. Like, I can reach a few thousand people for $5. So it's helpful.
But that's
it's still, you
in the
can't.
US, but it's not for me in Australia. For me in Australia, we're on the old model. People in the UK are on a different model. I think they're on a £1 model at the moment. This is the problem that I'm saying about marketing.
That's true.
It is not an equal platform yet.
Well, hopefully we get there to that point.
Yeah.
And really, I think authors need to be more creative too, or try to be. And because the one thing I do always caution about, and what irritates me about, say, legacy publishing or what's going on in the industry, is it's so formulaic now.
Yeah.
that,
That's what I'm saying. Said
and I
before
would
about
just,
the lack of diversity
sure, and I would tell the
with the hero's
authors,
journey.
look, you show me a great work throughout history that didn't break the mold, and that's how it became a great work
Yeah, the
for people.
hero's journey was an original work, but now it is the formula, the superhero formula. They just took our mythology and put a New York landscape behind it. You know?
Right, sure. And so I would,
Yeah.
I would caution people, don't worry about, because I do see social media posts about that.
Yeah.
Let me give you the 5 steps. This is how you
The
should be
5 steps to
writing.
success.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
every
how you
writer
should
gets
write.
that ad.
Yeah, how you
Every
should
author
write
gets
your
that ad.
book, and how it should flow. It's, try different things as well, because I think we're coming to an age of
Have you got the
technology.
AI ads yet? The AI ads telling you to, for only $27 a month, I'll make you a best-selling author.
Sure, sure. It's
Oh, you can. If you,
absolutely. There'll never
because
be
if
a
they
shortage
could,
of those, and there'll never be a shortage of those for sure.
yeah. Because I'm pretty sure if you could make me a best-selling author for $27, I think you could make yourself a best-selling author and make $100 million and not.
That's that's right.
Uh,
Oh, but
but
yeah, no,
a
that's
lot of
true.
people, they buy reviews, they fake it till they make it. But guess what? For every fake who makes it, there's 1,000 who fall by the roadside. This is a highly competitive industry, and the only way you're going to succeed is to take advantage of that 1 week window to make at least, you're going to make a few $1,000s a year. Just 90%, 90% are only going to make that few thousand a year. So learn to appreciate what you've got and try not to over accumulate, because if you're, look, over accumulation, like, a lot of people don't understand this, but you take on a project and then another project, another project. You're like, people say, oh, you got a great book, become a screenwriter, write the screenplay. Now here's your, now do the marketing, now do this and that, and then suddenly realize that you're paying them to make money for them
Oh,
of
sure,
your work.
absolutely, absolutely, and that is the model I hope changes as we move through this
Yeah,
process
the
and see
Amazon
it
model is
unfold.
no longer, I think, the model. It was a great model to start with. It gave us access to publishing, but it's no longer competitive from our perspective. It is merely, Amazon is losing money. It's losing us money because because out of a $4.99 book, you're getting 60 cents, and 30 cents of that's going to the government. It's like, whoa, I'm not lying here. Anybody, ask
That's
any
it.
author.
Sure.
Absolutely, you're not getting 70% anymore.
No, not at all. But I still have high hopes to make my first million off my 99-cent short story on Barnes and Nobles. That's all I can say.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm not mocking you for that. Everybody's got to have their 99-cent book. Now, the link will be added to the description below, but I just mean the people who get lured in by the, hey, bro, here's the AI. Just write the 99-cent book and
Yep.
we'll churn them out. But what you're not realizing is you're making money for them, not for yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And you've got a lot of, do you have a favorite writer, any inspiration?
I tell you, I've always had a huge thing, and like you say, you get pushed back a lot. I have a huge fan of Hemingway, uh, and mainly I think that stems from his personal life more than
Well,
which affected his writing.
yeah.
So
If you
and
realize that for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. He's talking about his friend who died in the Spanish Civil War, which he was covering at the time.
and he's
and
just
after that,
and his personal relationships, like
yeah,
with his first wife Haley, and it's all fascinating to me. But
and
I
his
am a huge fan of
relationships
his
at
work.
Cuba.
Yeah, absolutely. He was a good drinker, so
Yeah.
so I can relate, but yeah, definitely a huge Hemingway fan, and I've always been a fan of things that are more dark, possibly, from a character psychological perspective. Capote always kind of fascinated me with some of his work as well, to do his dive into, like in Cold Blood, and do his dive by interviewing the murderers and incorporating them into his writing for the characters. And it was also a fan of that kind of work. So
Now, I know we've covered a lot of tips for writers. Is there anything you'd like to add specifically right now? A new writer's sitting there going, bro, give me some inspiration.
And I might have got ahead of myself on one of my previous answers, but again, I just, and I've said it in interviews before, that I can't express enough that I think it may sound simplistic, but by all means, please write and share what's inside of you, and worry about the technicalities later, and get it on paper and do that, because otherwise it'll be lost. If it doesn't get outside of you, it'll be lost forever. And that's a shame.
Now, when I speak of diversity, I do not mean political philosophy or mass media marketing. I am talking about the fact that different cultures will do something different. Right. That's why today's political analysts on TV, the talking heads, they have no clue, because they are projecting their own interpretations of how they would act under those same circumstances. But they have not lived that history, so they don't understand that their answers to the questions of solutions, like, just break down the barriers. No, you don't understand why different cultures put barriers up between each other. Because in one respect, those barriers made good neighbors. Good fences make good neighbors. People forget that. Where you have your culture, I have mine. I'm not intruding on your land, you're not intruding on mine. And that doesn't work well with the hero's journey. That doesn't work well with, like, could you imagine For Whom the Bell Tolls been written today?
I can't imagine a lot of the great works being written today. In fact,
no, but you can imagine if some, say, an ABC journalist or a CNN journalist comes out of the Ukraine war and writes about his Ukrainian friend who gets absolutely slaughtered. Right, him and his entire company get slaughtered, and you have suddenly come to the realization that the politics of both sides was completely effed up, and that ultimately it didn't matter which side he was on. He lost his life fighting for a cause that didn't make sense even to him. Right? Could you imagine that coming out today?
And no, and I mean, your point is absolutely
he wouldn't be
valid.
like, for one, he wouldn't be at ABC or CNN for much longer.
And he definitely wouldn't get a legacy publishing contract. So
yet they would put out For Whom the Bell Tolls.
Well, and they'd let an AI narrator narrate it. So
yeah. But they would sell it for $43 and give him 6 cents.
Right. Well, they'll give him the 6 cents if it isn't part of the monthly membership package that someone purchased the book off.
Yeah. Now, to a lot of people, I know it sounds dismal, but this is our way of cope. You have your own way. We respect that. But understand that 99% of authors, and I don't mean just in the West, I mean 99% of the authors across the world aren't going to make more than $5,000. Accept that reality, do your best, and appreciate the fact if you break the mold. because it isn't the formula MCU. Look, for the MCU, yes, you can see it making a lot of money. For Disney, for the $200+ million that went to the 5 or 6 directors that they used, who pretty much, there's no trickle down economy. Last time I checked, none of them spend outside their Hollywood bubble. Hollywood, believe it or not, I've had a background in accounting and in economics and economic theory, social theory. Then I did computer science. So all this time, I've avoided writing stories. So when George says, get it out there or it's lost, trust me, there are more. I had piles of unfinished manuscripts that got thrown out because I just could not, landlords, rules, regulations, fire hazards, the drill, right? Pre-computer days, when I didn't have a computer, right? Believe it or not, there is a time that most people didn't have a computer.
That was it.
So yes, write that story and finish it.
And that's it. And don't be a writer to make money. Be a writer to write literature.
Yeah.
And maybe you'll get lucky, but it's and
believe me, it is
historically accurate.
Look, Frank Herbert, he wrote a fantastic series of books, but he's only known for the first one.
Right. Well, I think and yeah, get it out there. I don't think we could wrap it up any better than to just say get it out there.
Now, before we go, I mean, obviously, one of the problems a lot of people have is stress. Now, most successful people don't deny stress; they manage it.
That's absolutely true, and you need to. Stress can be a driver, obviously, and it depends on the person, obviously, and their personality. For me, that kind of time stress and it kind of drives me and fuels me to get things done. But everybody has to unwind. I mean, myself, I play music with some bandmates in a little cover band to unwind, but I also
I do this.
yeah, and I also do a little sailing. I like to sail, and that's a quiet place out there. So.
One of the most amazing stories that I read was about the story of Thor Heyerdahl. Now, not the god, he was named after the god, but he sailed from Peru to Easter Island.
Oh yeah, there's some great
great sailors. Yeah,
I try to stay close. Ever since I got my butt whipped by a storm once, I like coastal cruising. Yeah, I like coastal cruising now.
Yeah, but he sailed on a raft, and I was thinking that that is true diversity of thought. I have an idea. I do this amazing journey, and then when I tell people about it, they're amazed. And then people don't want formula. They look. I know studios say I know what our editors are going to say. Pretty much, I know what half your audience is going to say. But trust me, right? When Marcia Lucas saw the dog's mess on the table, and she crafted it into the hero's journey and one of the greatest stories ever told. That is what you're going to be doing after your first draft, right? George wrote the first draft, but the story we got, that's one of the things, right? You're going to be a marketer, but you also have to be your own editor.
Yes, there's no shortage of what portions of the field indie authors have to be.
Yeah, you're not
talented.
You're not George Lucas, whatever he did at Berkeley to make friends with some of the most richest and powerful in Hollywood, that they would give him $100 million to make not one, not two, but 3 movies, like straight out of college. Those days are gone, because when those people get to the top, they pull up the ladder.
That's it.
So I'm not I'm not, what would you call it? Doom and gloom. I'm trying to have people learn to be happy and not expect success. Understand that? Not to
Well,
expect
sure, and
success.
you can't function effectively not knowing reality. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's a tough business, but look, people have done it. So just put it on the
Oh yeah.
paper, that's for sure.
But the thing is, we're in the most competitive industry. You don't have 7,000 movies coming out a week. You don't have a front page of Amazon where, unless you're a multi-millionaire, you can't afford to knock somebody off that number 1 spot. Yeah, I've seen it. I've seen Amazon create new tiers in their Kindle range just to put one book at number 1. But that costs somebody $10,000.
Sure. And
That's what we don't see. A lot of us don't see what's going on behind the scenes.
And it's true. It's an illusion to some consumers, how things get recommended. Other
Yes.
Like Amazon. Others who bought this also bought this. Well, that also bought this, got paid for to be stuck in your
In
face.
some cases, that ad is costing the author $100 a day for one sale.
Right, and it's
for 9 cents return. And they are, but trust me, there are hundreds of people who have a job, who have a career, who have 6, 7, 8-figure incomes. And yes, the money they're flashing, their YouTube channels are big. Yes, they're big, successful authors. But what they're not telling you is that they have a $100 million real estate empire that's financing it.
Right.
I've researched some of these people. Yeah, some of the biggest YouTubers. Oh yeah, I was a multimillionaire when I started.
Well, like I said, I'm hoping I'm hoping some things in the industry can change, but they're going to be driven by people like us or indie authors.
Who can actually sits down and say, I'm not a Luddite. Here are the rules for AI. I think you're going to like them, because it is basically locking AI in as a thesaurus.
Right. Don't let it write your work for you. Be you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like when I was 18 and when I was 18 and just starting university, and he says, one day AI will make movies, turn our stories into movies. And I thought back then that was great, until I realized that that's 15,000 people out of work.
Right. We forgot that part. We forgot that part.
1 or 2 people are going to still make $100 billion, because they're not going to they'll initially drop the price like they did with the 99-cent book, right?
Right.
But then only the company makes all the money, because they make the 90 cents, you make the 9 cents. And Apple goes to here, and all these authors are still down here, and the musicians. And it's like you hear all these people who say, oh, I made $100 million on this platform. Yeah, but how much did it cost you to do it?
Yep. That's it. And I think we'll figure it out. I have hopes we will.
No, I'm not criticizing you for having a 99-cent book, because that is your prerogative. I'm talking about, again, the people who are lured into it thinking they're going to make us $100,000 a week.
Sure,
and those people selling that program, if they really made $100,000 a week off 99-cent books, would they be offering to do it for you? It's like,
right. That's any sales technique, if it's that easy, everyone would be doing it. So
unfortunately, too many people are linear thinkers, not lateral thinkers. Because lateral thinkers like us write books. If you want a diverse character, if you want to understand if you want to make a good character, right? And I've said this before, Putin would make a better villain than Darth Vader. And that is
Absolutely.
why he's demonized, because he makes a perfect villain. He makes sense. He's not raving mad. He is very strong and forceful in his personality. And most of the time what he says is right and makes sense. That is what makes the best villains. They make
Sure,
sense.
and he
they're
has a
ambitious.
history. And he has
And
a
they have a
history.
history.
Yep, that you can build out. He has a history that you could build out to fit the villain narrative. That's
Yes,
exactly
he has
right.
admitted that in his professional duties, he is terminated, so to speak, is terminated 6 times. And that gives you a reputation. That you know that in his pocket, that's not a calculator.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good it is. It's a good character build out for sure. And they've done a wonderful job. They've done a wonderful job building out that character for the global stage.
Yeah. And really, Putin, what most people don't realize, he was a news analyst in Germany at the Russian desk in the embassy. His terminations were as a bodyguard for Boris Yeltsin. He's not a villain in Russian eyes, but if you take the context out, he makes a perfect villain.
Absolutely.
So, anything you'd like to add? This has been an amazing conversation. I hope I've given not just you and myself, but a lot of people out there inspiration and tips, so that, because in your life, if you did not read a diverse amount of material, do you think you would be able to be writing?
Yeah, and you can't. You have to have
Could you write a
influences.
villain? Could you write, say we didn't have Putin to work off? Could you write a villain? Let's say you grew up with fairy tales. Could you write a villain like Darth Vader or Thanos? Could you write those without having a diverse experience?
No, and I don't think you can, because if you're going to live your life one dimensionally, anything you try to create will probably be right, for sure. And no, I guess just I'd close by just thanking you for having me. Obviously, David, I've really enjoyed the conversation. It's been fascinating, and to your viewers that'll watch the show, hopefully, excuse me, you may have gotten something out of it. And I think to close, for my American audience and friends, just get the really single most important question out the way for this Australian show is, does your toilets actually swirl in reverse from it? Okay, I just
it's actually, now to clarify, there is actually a book that explains this on exactly the 4 parts of the world. You have swell 1, swell 2, swell 3, and swell 4, but you also have the cap swell. So there are actually 6 different ways water swells depending where you are on the globe.
Well, okay. Well, that's what I needed to clear up. That was the one thing I was hoping to clear up with the interview. So,
but in a lot of modern toilets, they don't swell because they're narrow.
Oh, okay.
To swell, you needed the old round toilets.
Oh,
they don't do that anymore. They use
technology ruins it. Technology ruins
technology
everything.
ruins it. Yeah, tech ruins everything. But I do hope. Look, I've been there. I know how AI works. I know how it functions. It's only as good as its programmer, and I really hope that AI bless authors. I mean, right now I know how tempting it is. They're telling you they'll make you a bestseller, but trust me, if they could, they would.
That's it.
Because a best-selling author 20, 30 years ago, yes, sure, a handful of people made it. You'll hear about George R.R. Martin telling you about all the amazing money he's made writing scripts for other people. He's writing TV shows, not so much from his books. That's why he has written so few books. because he's made more money. He admitted it. He made more money going on the BBC to talk about Ice and Fire than he did from Ice and Fire.
Right. That's it.
He made more money writing the Ice and Fire script and selling the rights for $15 million, not a season, by the way. He clarified that. No, he only got $15 million. So the rest of the money was appearances, merchandise, etc.
The work. The hard work.
So,
the hard work of writing.
The hard work. Yeah, the hard work is the writing, followed by the marketing.
That is it. Put yourself out there. So
thank you, everybody, especially George. But, I thank the audience because it's the audience that makes the show. It's the audience who keeps coming back. And hopefully one of these days you will be here telling me about your inspirations and your works and carrying forth the legacy that eventually one day that, a fan of Hemingway, because Hemingway was once just like us, only a journalist.
That's right. That is exactly right. But David, I really do appreciate it, man.
Yeah, I do too. Thanks everybody for coming. And the links in the description below. And I'll be adding the 2 Barnes & Noble links. Now this processing sometimes takes 5 minutes. Sometimes takes an hour. The amazing technology.
That's right. Maybe my first $1 million off my Barnes & Noble's links to the viewership. That's
I appreciate it, man. I really do. Thank you for an excellent conversation. But I think it's time to go.
Thanks a lot, David. I appreciate you.
Thank you, everybody. Please like, share, and subscribe. And to support the channel, check out the links in the description below. And, of course, George's, you'll see George, his links. And, as he said, let's make our first $1 million together. See you later.